The Sony PlayStation Portable was a revolutionary handheld when it was released in 2005. However, its greatest strength was also its greatest flaw in my opinion. The large LCD was an absolute marvel at the time, but it suffered from some ghosting and dead pixels. At the time, the PSP utilized a TFT panel. However, there now seems to be IPS replacements that are available as near drop-in solutions. Will this IPS kit solve the issues of the original LCD? Well, let's find out. Hey everyone, how's it going? My name is Tito and welcome to another episode of Retro Renew. Today we're going to be taking a look at yet another IPS kit, except this time though, it'll be for the Sony PlayStation Portable. More specifically, the 1000 series model, which was the original and also happens to be my favorite version. The PSP is one of my favorite handhelds. At the time, it was like being able to carry a PS2 in your pocket. The games just simply looked amazing. I purchased one used not too long after it was released and enjoyed some really amazing titles on the console such as Final Fantasy VII, Crisis Core, and Silent Hill Origins. If you're also a fan of the PSP, give this video a thumbs up and let me know what your favorite title was for the console in the comments below. Now, despite being an amazing technological leap in handhelds at the time, one of the minor issues I had with the console was the LCD, which exhibited some ghosting due to a slow refresh rate. As beautiful as the display was, especially during the time it was released, it was still a noticeable flaw. Quite a few viewers wanted me to do a video on this particular IPS kit, so here it is. I'm actually pretty excited to see if there are in fact any improvements by installing this specific panel. Alright, so I want to start off by showing you what's included in this IPS kit. Then I'll demonstrate how to install it, discuss the key features of the mod, go over the pros and cons, and of course provide you with my overall thoughts. So I'll be demonstrating the installation on this beat up PSP, which I recently bought on eBay. This is an original 1000 model, and as you may be able to see, there is a large blotch in the center of the screen. This will make for a great candidate for replacing the LCD. Now, there aren't too many things included in the IPS kit. The first and most important item is the IPS panel itself. Its dimensions are identical to the original LCD, so this will essentially drop in. And here you can see the part number on the ribbon cable. The next item included is the ribbon cable adapter. The tiny breakout here is what powers the backlight, and their thicker portion is the IPS panel data lines. It would have been nice if this was already integrated onto the LCD itself. And the last item included is this foam gasket. This is what will prevent dust from getting in between the LCD and the lens. Great, that just about covers everything. So without any further ado, let's start this project. So surprisingly, the PSP isn't that hard to get into. The front faceplate is held on by 7 Phillips screws. Start off by removing the battery. Then remove the 2 Phillips screws. We'll need to peel off this label in order to expose the remaining 2 Phillips screws in the battery compartment. There are 2 more screws on the back as shown here, and the last one can be found on the bottom of the console. Once they're all removed, you should be able to lift off the front shell housing. Next, with a small flathead screwdriver, gently pry off the lower button bracket as shown. Then delatch and remove the ribbon cable. Carefully remove the LCD by gently prying around the edges as shown until it is released from the metal frame. Lift the LCD up slightly to reveal the ribbon cables we'll need to remove. Start by removing the smaller one, which is responsible for powering the LCD backlight. Then delatch the larger one and remove it as well. With the old LCD off, we'll need to bridge these 2 tiny pads shown here. Pre-tin the pads with some solder. Then bridge the connection with a very thin gauge wire. and cut off any excess. And here's what it should look like. Now we're going to install the ribbon cable adapter. Make sure the ribbon cable is properly seated and then lock it in. And then do the same for the thicker side. Connect the IPS panel ribbon cable to the adapter as shown. Once connected, place the LCD into the chassis. Go ahead and reconnect the lower button bracket ribbon cable. However, before setting it in place, let's install the foam gasket. Start by peeling the release liner. Then carefully place it over the LCD, making sure not to stick it onto the glass. You'll notice I left the protective film on the LCD to ensure the foam gasket doesn't adhere to it. Once the gasket is in place, peel away the center portion. Then go ahead and install the bottom button bracket by clipping it in place. Peel away the protective film on the LCD, then reinstall the front shell housing. Go ahead and fasten the 7 screws to button up the PSP. Install the battery, and you're done. I can already tell that this IPS screen is brighter than the original, and upon initial inspection, I want to say that the ghosting has been diminished in some capacity, which is fantastic. But to be sure, I'll run a side-by-side comparison with my original unmodified PSP to see if there was in fact any improvement. But before we do that, let's go over the features of this kit first. So in terms of features, this kit really doesn't bring anything new to the table. The PSP was already backlit and had a pretty nice display to begin with. Now, one of the features it does have is the brighter display. This is very noticeable and was advertised as having 1000 nits of brightness, nits being a standard unit of measure for brightness. Now, other than that, there really isn't anything new here. I'm just hoping for a higher quality display that maybe alleviates some of the ghosting. Which leads me to the pros and cons. Now, starting with the pros, like I mentioned prior, the screen is certainly brighter, which is always a welcome improvement. This should make it more comfortable to play in brighter settings, such as outdoors. Now, most importantly, did this reduce ghosting? And the bottom line is, I think it has. While playing some games, I noticed I wasn't really getting distracted by any ghosting. The slower refresh rate of the old display, which caused the ghosting, I always felt was quite noticeable and a bit distracting. I'm hoping the side-by-side comparison will demonstrate any improvements with the new IPS display. The last pro I would say is cost. I paid roughly $40 US for this kit shipped, which I think is fair. However, this obviously doesn't have as much of a visual impact as the kits for traditionally non-backlit systems, such as the original Game Boy and Game Boy Color. That being said, it's a fantastic replacement option. Okay, let's get into the cons, and honestly, I only have a really small one. This kit is nearly a drop-in solution. The dimensions are identical to the original screen, however, you do need to bridge 2 small pads on the motherboard, which can be challenging for some. For someone who is experienced, this is a fairly simple task, but those hoping that this was simply a drop-in solution, that's unfortunately not the case here. On the bright side, there's no need for trimming or shell modification, which is absolutely fantastic. So I can hear you asking, Tito, is this worth swapping out my original screen for this IPS replacement? And well, to be honest, I'd say no. However, if you have a damaged screen, then this is a no-brainer. But if yours is working just fine, you may want to keep your PSP the way it is. While I did notice improvements in ghosting and the screen is much brighter, the original is still pretty darn good. If you're insistent on reducing the ghosting or perhaps getting rid of some dead pixels, then I would say this mod is worthwhile. But again, this is an incremental improvement as opposed to a wholesale upgrade that we would see on something like a Game Boy IPS kit, especially on consoles that were not previously backlit. So there you have it, an IPS replacement LCD for the original PlayStation Portable. As always, I'm curious about what you all think of this kit. Do you think this is something that you would do to your PSP? Definitely let me know by leaving a comment with your thoughts down below. I hope you did enjoy this video. If you did, please give it a like and consider subscribing to the channel. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Macho Nacho Productions. I release content every Thursday, so be sure to turn on notifications. And as always, see you next time.